in your prepared statement that there are three basic criticisms of the FBI which it is addressing. The one that I was struck by was the middle one, where you say that the FBI failed to exchange information with other elements of the intelligence community, and that it is addressing that failure or that criticism. But what I hear from Mr. McGaffin and Mr. Hamre is that they wouldn't say that that's the right question. And so this is the second part of my question, is to the two of you. Because the way you pose the question, it is not did they share the information they had, but did they cooperate with others in setting the strategic goals of collection and go out together with the other relevant agencies, primarily in the intelligence community, to seek out the right information domestically. And so my first question is whether the three of you would comment on that. That is, what is it that is the failure, if you will, and how are we going about addressing that failure? And if you could be brief, because I have a number of follow-ups, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I do think one of the failures was the failure to have in place, develop, foster intelligence collection as a function distinct from building criminal cases with criminal predicates. And I also think it was a failure not to have an analytical capability. And a lot of the sharing problems were caused by, in my view, ill-conceived constraints on law enforcement and the sharing of intelligence information. In terms of the setting of the target, it's true that intelligence collection is different than gathering, and it should be focused, and there has to be some agreement as to what the end is. But I also think we can get a little carried away here, because a lot of this counterterrorism intelligence domestically within the United States has a somewhat of a tactical flavor to it. In other words, it is focusing on groups and elements. It's not sort of sitting back and saying, where's the next threat coming from? And, you know, is this a breeding ground for terrorists over here in this part of Africa or what have you? That's CIA's function. But the function of sort of protecting the homeland when groups get into the United States has a certain operational tactical flavor to it. And I'm not sure that, you know, it's the same as sort of doing national intelligence estimates and sitting around figuring that, you know, I don't think it takes that long to figure that out, frankly.
We have already stressed the importance of intelligence analysis that can draw on all relevant sources of information. The biggest impediment to all source analysis, to a greater likelihood of connecting the dots, is the human or systematic resistance to sharing information. The U.S. government has access to a vast amount of information. When databases not usually thought of as intelligence, such as customs or immigration information, are included, the storehouse is immense. The U.S. government has a weak system for processing and using what it has. In interviews around the government, official after official urged the 9/11 Commission to call attention to frustrations with the unglamorous back office side of government operations. In the 9/11 story, for example, we sometimes see examples of information that could be accessed, like the undistributed NSA information that would have helped identify Nawaf al-Hazmi in January of 2000. But someone had to ask for it. In that case, no one did. Or, as in the episodes we described in Chapter 8, the information is distributed, but in a compartmented channel, or the information is available, and someone does ask, but it cannot be shared. What all these stories have in common is a system that requires a demonstrated need to know before sharing. This approach assumes it is possible to know in advance who will need to use the information. Such a system implicitly assumes that the risk of inadvertent Disclosure outweighs the benefits of wider sharing. Those Cold War assumptions are no longer appropriate. The culture of agencies feeling they own the information they gathered at taxpayer expense must be replaced by a culture in which the agencies instead feel they have a duty to the information to repay the taxpayer's investment by making that information available. Each intelligence agency has its own security practices, outgrowths of the Cold War. We certainly understand the reason for these practices. Counterintelligence concerns are still real, even if the old Soviet enemy has been replaced by other spies. But the security concerns need to be weighed across the costs. Current security requirements nurture overclassification and excessive compartmentalization of information among agencies. Each agency's incentive structure opposes sharing with risks, criminal, civil, and internal administrative sanctions, but few rewards for sharing information. No one has to pay the long-term costs of overclassifying information, though these costs, even in literal financial terms, are substantial. There are no punishments for not sharing information. Agencies uphold a need-to-know culture of information protection rather than promoting a need-to-share culture of integration. Recommendation: information procedures should provide incentives for sharing to restore a better balance between security and shared knowledge. Intelligence gathered about transitional terrorism should be processed, turned into reports, and distributed according to the same quality standards, whether it is collected in Pakistan or in Texas. The logistical objection is that sources and methods may vary greatly in different locations. We at the 9/11 Commission therefore propose that when a report is first created, its data be separated from the sources and methods by which they are obtained. The report should begin with the information in its most shareable but still meaningful form. Therefore, the maximum number of recipients can access some form of that information. If knowledge of further details become important, any user can query further, with access granted or denied according to the rules set for the network, and with queries leaving an audit trail in order to determine who accessed that information. But the questions may not come at all unless experts at the edge of the network can readily discover the clues that prompt to them. We propose that information be shared horizontally across new networks that transcend individual agencies. 1. The current system is structured on an old mainframe or hub and spoke concept. In this older approach, each agency has its own database. Agency users send information to the database and they can retrieve it from the database. 2. Decentralized network model. The concept behind much of the information revolution shares data horizontally too. Agencies would still have their own databases, but those databases would be searchable across agency lines. In this system, secrets are protected through the design of the network and an information rights management approach that controls access to the data, not access to the whole network. An outstanding conceptual framework for this kind of trusted information network has been developed by a task force of leading professionals in national security information technology and law assembled by the Markle Foundation. Its report has been widely discussed throughout the U.S. government, but has not yet been converted into action. Recommendation: the president should lead the government-wide effort to bring the major national security institutions into the information revolution. He should coordinate the resolution of the legal policy and technical issues across agencies to create a trusted information network. No one agency can do it alone. Well-meaning agency officials are under tremendous pressure to update their systems. Alone, they may only be able to modernize the stovepipes, not replace them. Only presidential leadership can develop government-wide concepts and standards. Currently, no one is doing the job. Backed by the Office of Management and Budget, a new National Intelligence Director empowered to set common standards for information use throughout the community, and a Secretary of Homeland Security who helps extend the system to public agencies and relevant private sector databases. Government-wide initiative can succeed. White House leadership is also needed because the policy and legal issues are harder than the technical ones. The necessary technology already exists. What does not are the rules for acquiring, accessing, sharing, and using the vast stores of public and private data that may be available. When information sharing works, it is a powerful tool. Therefore, the sharing and uses of information must be guided by a set of practical policy guidelines that simultaneously empower and constrain officials, telling them clearly what is and is not permitted.